M1 Abrams costs about $10 million apiece, clearly a valuable collection. But getting them where they need to go isn't always easy. Today we break down how the military moves the priceless M1 Abram from one place to another. Spoiler alert, it isn't by driving them. We won't lie, the M1 Abrams gets driven sometimes, but only if transported short distances across flat terrain. M1 Abrams and tanks in general aren't exactly known for their excellent gas mileage or impressive handling. If you've watched our video on what it's like to drive a tank, you know wedging into it is one of the most uncomfortable things you could do. The crew that drives these tanks are usually packed into tight, stifling, hot compartments that aren't known for their amenities. But even if you don't consider the comfort of the crew over long trips, like taking some much-needed bathroom breaks, driving the tank farther than is necessary isn't too bright for plenty of other reasons. The M1 Abrams are super rugged and nearly impossible to flip because modern tanks still can't handle complex environments. Cold climates can cause engines to freeze. And snow makes it too hard for the crew to spot potential dangers. Steep hills are a no-go, as are most city streets, and deep mud can cause a headache for operators. God forbid you run into a river, you might find yourself on a bridge that can't support your 70-ton ride. Even if your path is clear, tanks are incredibly expensive to operate. The M1 Abrams tank needs about 2 gallons of fuel for just 1 mile of driving to quench its thirst. And that's not much more than a fighter jet for comparison. Knowing this, the most expensive way to transport tanks would be to drive them to new locations that are extremely far away. Driving such astronomical distances would mean each mile on these specialized combat vehicles is more wear and tear. That means more repair costs, labor costs, and maintenance costs. No thank you. No one wants to get rid of $10 million machines that fast. And definitely not the US military if it costs them that much dough. Mind you, the US military has thrown a lot of money at more worthless things in the past. But there's another reason why M1 Abram tanks can't just drive to the front lines. The reason is their stealth. A line of tanks driving down the road toward a combat zone isn't exactly sneaky, and driving a herd of these to an active war zone makes you a surefire target for enemies scouting by air. Obviously, the tanks need to get to their destination, but how? Well, the military has lots of options. By road on a trailer. When the distance, terrain, or stealth makes driving the tanks themselves a no-go, military tanks are transported on specialized vehicles called tank transporters. Tank transporters are massive, multi-wheeled vehicles designed specifically to move tanks and other heavy military equipment. The most common one in use today is the Oshkosh M1070, also known as the Heavy Equipment Transporter or HET. The HET is a robust tractor truck with 8 wheels and advanced features. It has an electronic engine control system to ensure it operates as efficiently as possible, and an air-ride rear suspension to keep all the wheels on the ground and reduce jarring shocks when driving on rough terrain. It sounds like this bad boy has some endurance. The transporter also has a central tire inflation system to help with traction on uneven terrain. Behind the M1070 cab, the tanks ride on a trailer that supports up to 70 tons across its 40 tires. Tank transporters are a valuable tool for reducing wear and tear on tracks as they are less harmful to road surfaces and help conserve fuel. Tanks are loaded onto the transporter using ramps or tilt belts. If transported to a combat zone, HETs face the same stealth obstacles as tanks, so convoys are usually carefully planned and executed during the darkness of the night. The tanks may even be disguised or hidden under coverings, making them more difficult to spot from the sky. HETs are more efficient and less costly than driving tanks, but they are still imperfect. It gets about 2 miles to the gallon fully loaded, so gassing up the transporters is still pretty pricey. And with a range of just over 300 miles, fuel stops have to be planned carefully. And of course, HETs cannot do the job alone if the final destination is, say, across an ocean. By water. That's where ro-ro ships come in. Roll-on, roll-off ships and barges are specifically designed to carry wheeled vehicles, making the loading and unloading tanks much more accessible than any other ship. No cranes are needed, just drive right on. In most ro-ros, we love saying that word, the ramp is located at the stern or rear of the vessel, but sometimes it's in the bow or the sides. Ramps are also situated at the port for ships that need a built-in ramp. Ro-ro ships usually operate in reduced capacity because they are only needed when moving massive military equipment and vehicles like helicopters and tanks. This means they're typically running with a small full-time crew and only kick into go mode when they know they're needed somewhere. In the US, the RoRos fall under the umbrella of the Military Sealift Command, which supplies ships to the US military from a core fleet owned by the Navy and through charters of merchant ships. Tanks have also been moved around the globe plenty of times on other types of cargo ships, but RoRos are unique because of their many advantages, which makes the military smile wide. They are happy to use RoRos when they can. RoRo ships are usually the best option for moving tanks across large bodies of water with a port waiting on the other side. But what about situations when the military needs to be more discreet than unloading at a port? The solution is amphibious warfare. It is an offensive operation used to move ground and air vehicles to a place that is unsafe or too visible to land. One of the best-known examples is the landing ship tanks, or LSTs, used at Normandy on D-Day during World War II. But the ships used in D-Day have long retired and been replaced with more advanced, effective ones. Today, the military mainly uses the Landing Craft Air Cushion, or LCAC, to transport troops and equipment from amphibious ships to the shore. This is the only type of transport that can move an M1 Abrams tank from ship to shore. This strange-looking vehicle resembles a giant airboat that uses air cushion technology and large duct rear propellers to skim the water at up to 40 knots with a full payload. The LCACs have been used since the 1980s and will soon be replaced by larger, faster air cushion transport vehicles called ship-to-shore connectors, or SSCs. By air. Moving tanks by sea is a landing operation method possible on just about any shoreline on the planet. Transporting tanks by ship or truck is the preferred method for moving massive vehicles internationally, but sometimes an air delivery is needed. Using planes for transportation is less ideal since tanks are super heavy. Generally speaking, combining massively heavy objects and air travel isn't the best idea. The difficulty of air transport is that heavy payloads such as a tank or two reduce the range of the aircraft and cause the plane to burn through fuel much faster. Despite the challenges, a few cargo planes can transport the M1 Abrams tank, like the US Air Force's C-5 Galaxy cargo plane. It is the largest plane in the US inventory and is powered by 4 commercial engines, equipped with 5 sets of landing gear and 28 wheels. The Galaxy has a wingspan of an impressive 222 feet. The Galaxy's nose and aft doors open with full-width ramps, so tanks and other cargo can be loaded and unloaded simultaneously. It has room for 2 M1 Abrams, but they would rarely carry that many. Loading ramp limitations mean the tanks must have their fuel unloaded and weight lightened by removing ammo and other equipment. And the weight of 2 tanks would considerably cut down the aircraft's range, making refueling an additional logistic to consider during transportation. It's much more common for a smaller cargo plane, the C-17 Globemaster, to move 1 tank at a time. The C-17 was created with the ability to transport a fully equipped and armed Abrams tank, plus its tanker support truck. This aircraft is still a big beast, with just under 170 feet of wingspan. The C-17 has an international range and can land on even small airfields, making it an ideal choice for most air missions. By rail. Once the tanks reach the right continent, the preferred method to transport them long distances is by rail. Rail travel can accommodate many tanks simultaneously and is often faster than tank transporters. Plus, it's a lot more fuel efficient, requires a much smaller crew, and therefore costs less. Tanks are loaded into flatbed rail cars using portable tank rail ramps and mats that protect the rails during loading and unloading. The precious and costly tanks are secured to the flat cars using chains before the train starts rolling to its destination. Imagine the $10 million tank just rolled off the flat car. Disaster. Moving tanks by rail is a great method because you can also transport any amount of equipment you wish to on them. Dozens of tanks, support trucks, fuel, ammo, supplies, and troops can be moved together, ready to move into action as soon as they reach their destination. Of course, this does come with a downside. In combat situations, enemy forces can easily spot large movements of tanks from the air, making them highly prized targets for attack. Destroying a railway used to transport tanks, other military vehicles, and supplies will give the opponent a serious advantage in combat, not to mention the amount of money wasted in the process. Moving tanks around the globe, especially in active combat zones, is a logistical challenge. But we shall leave that up to the experts and those with great courage. But still, there are few corners of the Earth the military couldn't deliver an M1 Abrams tank to, even if needed. But they hopefully won't need to anytime soon.